You are watching the New American Media.
You are listening to the Agree to Disagree program on the newamericanmedia.com.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for sticking with us as we made that transition from sports to world events. We'll just call it world events. Because really, there's nothing on Agree to Disagree that's too taboo. I suppose if that's a phrase that could be used. Special thanks to Zach Barris, NBA scout and lifelong Cleveland sports fan. He's been co-hosting. He's been a guest so many times on our program. It's just like he's co-hosting, and we are pleased to speak again with another multi-time guest, multiple guest, John B. Wells. John, you may have heard him on, I don't know, various voiceover projects. He has one of the most distinctive voices out there, and lately, for the better part of this year, he has been the new Saturday night host of Coast to Coast AM. It's the world's largest overnight radio show. And John's been on the program a few times. He's filled in for Alex Jones. He's doing a lot more of these types of shows, and definitely paying attention and staying keyed in with world events. And we certainly appreciate that, because there's so much that we have to there's so much to keep an eye on. There's so much to keep your finger on the pulse of. You know, and John's talking to a lot of people every week that are also keeping their finger on the pulse, and it's always good conversation when he comes on the program, so we'll reach out to him right now. Hello, John. It is Brian Engelman with the New American Media. You are live on the air, sir. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. How are you, Brian?
I'm living the dream. I can't complain too much.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, actually there are a few things we could complain about, but the source of it can ultimately be traced back to ourselves.
Huh.
You know what I mean?
Well, that's an interesting thought. Please explain that.
Well, I think we've broached this subject before, and it's just not being vigilant, and just making the big mistake of, even after all the jokes and cliches have been passed around, we still wound up trusting our government. So these things that we complain about can be traced directly back to our inattentiveness to that which controls our lives. However, on the flip side, it appears that a lot of people are waking up. So perhaps this direction that we perceive we are going, that we don't want to go in, at least we can slow the ship down a little bit and possibly change course. It might be enough time.
There might be time to change the course. There might be time to stall. It's like what any good hostage negotiator does. If you can just speak with the person on the phone and try to distract them longer, you're buying time. You know, one extra minute might make a difference, an extra 10 minutes, an extra hour, and people are waking up. I think people are starting to realize that there's something a little more complex occurring, and that there's a lot of shiny toys and distractions that are dangled in front of us, whether it's politics or, you know, any other little false flag event or anything to distract us and keep us divided instead of united, because there's way many more people on this planet that are good people than sociopaths.
Oh, absolutely. You know, not to wax evangelical here, but I heard my favorite TV preacher. It's not like I'm sitting there, you know, glued every Sunday, but I check in with him frequently. He made the mention that people will get into trouble, and then they pray and they pray and they pray and they pray, and their prayers are answered, and then the problem goes away, and then all of a sudden they don't really need who they were praying to anymore, because the problem is fixed, the problem is gone, everything's fine now. And I think people would do well to remember that that's precisely the way we deal with our government too. Once we have one of those calms where it appears that somebody who is making a really good impression that he is looking out for the country, loves its people, believes in its people and the country. Every once in a while, one of these people comes along. When that happens, the detractors will be there, and they'll eventually be stifled. But then we relax our vigilance, and we let these things come creeping in again slowly and go, well, maybe that's not it, because we just went through some of that and got it all straightened out. It's like, well, here it comes again. So we're never going to cross the happy line where we no longer have to worry about this. We're going to have to get on it and stay on it and pass it down to our progeny, but they must do it too.
So that would be,
and not let everybody get so soft, that they don't care about it.
So that could be like out here in Southern California then, where you buy your ticket to Disneyland, you hand them your ticket, you cross the turnstiles, and now you're in the happiest place on earth, and you're okay for a while. Now it's good. Now we're all happy. Now everything is functioning properly. We're okay. We're cool. We can go back to sleep now. No, it doesn't really work that way, does it?
Well, even at Disneyland, you better not pull out anything illegal, or I guess maybe it's just a misdemeanor in California. You better not pull out any pot and light it up, or they'll kick you out. You better not pull out a flask of liquor and start drinking it in front of the kiddies. They're liable to throw you out. So even Disneyland has limits.
Even Disneyland is somebody else's house.
Well, yeah, and you got to buy a ticket before they'll let you in. So I think your analogy of Disneyland is quite a wonderful one.
Well, the metaphors start running real thick, and they become almost plaid and layered on top of each other. We could head down this path for a long time and try to out clever each other. Yeah, but it's the truth. I think what we're looking for is something where we can all just be left alone at the end of the day, like in network. We don't want people breathing down our necks, telling us what to do, bothering us. I don't think we really want to bother other people. But it sure seems like every time we turn on the radio, turn on the TV, somebody's pushing something on us, somebody's passing some illegal legislation, and it just keeps ramping up. I don't remember it being like this before.
I don't either. But the thing that's somewhat wonderful about it is that one of two things has happened. Either it's more flagrant, and there's an arrogance in that flagrance, or we're smarter and we see it sooner. I watched I just happened to see this story. It's called Unraveled. It was on one of the cable channels, or satellite now, I suppose. And it was about Mark Dreyer, the fellow who got 20 years federal time for just ripping off investors and playing with hedge funds, and he just got deeper and deeper. And it takes you through this man's life, and he's talking about this is like a week before, like 30 days before sentencing, to 7 days before going to the joint, all the way to that, the federal joint, and you see this man's face, and you hear what he speaks, and what he says is, the immorality of it bothered me, but it didn't stop me. This is human nature. Maybe television has turned out to be a good thing. Maybe if acting really is the study, the psychology of the human being, and being able to duplicate this psychology for viewing, the voyeur experience, the fly on the wall, watching this life go by. Maybe what it's done is codify our impressions of, that walks like a duck and quacks and all that, has all those characteristics of probably a duck. Maybe we've seen enough now to where we're beginning to spot this stuff. I mean, it's a little bit of a stretch, but it's possible that it's not as damaging as we thought, at least on the one hand. This Dreyer fellow, one of the things that he was going to say in court was that, well, there are a lot of other guys out there that did a lot worse than I did, so I should not get too stiff of a sentence. But his lawyer was looking at him and saying, that's not a good approach for this because it's $400 million. I mean, the reason I bring this up is that people that deal with those kind of numbers, and people who deal with the level of power that they have been granted by the people, with quotes around that, after a while, their perspective changes. Their perspective of misery, of the population, or happiness, or or which way the public opinion is going to go, they're in the rarefied air that we don't experience. We just don't, because we're not in that world, so we can't. But that's the thing. The immorality of what's going on probably bothers a lot of them, but it doesn't seem to stop them.
It reminds me of that George Carlin quote, talking about they have their little club. And guess what, folks? You and I, we're not in the club. And a lot can be extrapolated from that, and you wonder, well, why are people acting this way? Why are stockpiles starting to occur at different government agencies? Why is Social Security Administration purchasing that much ammunition? Why are they getting hundreds of millions of rounds of hollow point ammunition? Why does it feel like there's a ratcheting up of the police state? Why does it seem like judges are kind of oblivious to the Constitution and just the basic simple rule book? It's like the NFL officials calling a different game and making up their rules on the spot. It's like, there's a rule book to follow. Just because you have stripes on doesn't mean you're in charge. You're part of this system, and you're supposed to be objective here. And there are a lot of people saying that the whole system is rigged, whether it's politics, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's tax code. It's just it's a general awakening of, we're all about a fair system. Could we have one, please?
I think a fair system takes too much time to vet everybody. It's a lot faster a track to the top if you're vetted through your friends and the friends of your families who've known each other for generations, and who incidentally built the wing of that university over there. Fairness, I think fairness sometimes is Brian, I'll tell you, I'm going to go out on the clothesline with this one. I'm going to say I believe in right and wrong, but I'm not sure about fair and unfair. They seem to be related, but not entirely.
I hear you.
Even as there are like different interpretations of right and wrong, so it is on the other. It's really a wonderful experiment. You think about, just being alive. You look at all the things that we have that could actually benefit everybody, and then you see the grumpy ones over there in power that, no, I want it all for me. It seems that way. And then you have another group over here that's like, we've been mistreated, treated unfairly for X number of years, X number of generations, whoever it is. It could be the Irish, could be anybody.
Oh, you know what, John? Every group. If you look around, we can all subdivide ourselves into lots of tiny little categories. I've been abused as a Cleveland Browns fan. It's been decades of misery. Let's take the seriousness out of it and just say, every little subgroup within a larger group. Yeah, we've all had our rough times. We've all been up and down, and there have been horrible abuses and genocide. Let's just be honest with it. But that doesn't mean it needs to cloud today and tomorrow. To me, I don't think.
I think you're right. I think we need to just. If the problem is that we're torn between the human race of the future and the human race of the past, and worse, our basic human nature. It just holds us back, because it seems to be difficult to have the emotions that we desire to have, caring and love and satisfaction and all of those things that are good. But it just seems that we're not going to get all of those without the flip side of that coin, which is the immorality of it bothers me, but it doesn't stop me. Man, how many people can say that very thing about whatever they happen to be into, that they know is not right, but they don't stop?
I'm seeing the bumper sticker for that. I don't know where that goes and which corporate brand or which political party gets that, but that makes a good bumper sticker, John. The more you say it, the more it's really indicative of, well, I would prefer not to do it this way, but it beats the alternative.
I suppose it does. We seem to be inextricably linked to a set of behaviors. And, or as one old gal down in Texas said one time, all men are pigs. It's just the degree to which they can control their pigginess that determines whether or not we will have anything to do with them. And I thought, gee, that could be genius. It really could.
You know what else is genius about that? That leads me into a segue where I'm not going to make the connecting phrase. I will call attention to it, but I'll bring this up. Recently, this weekend, John, I ended up in a situation where I was confronted by 12 to 20 police officers in Los Angeles, and there was the police helicopter. Some people call it a pork chop, whatever the case may be. And it was very militaristic. The guise of attending the situation was the noise is too loud. This is a party. This party's too loud. We're shutting it down. And it quickly devolved into physical aggression from the paid police force to protect and serve. It quickly devolved into, without a warrant, going in and searching rooms and closets and threatening people and egging on instigation, antagonizing, being antagonistic to people as they were leaving, trying to egg them on into a confrontation, into a fight. And I can tell you, one of them grabbed me and almost threw me down a flight of stairs, John, and another one downstairs pulled the Ron White, are you in public right now? Are you on the sidewalk? Are you drunk in public? It's the whole Ron White skit from Blue Collar Comedy Tour. But it was real. And in response to me turning around as the cops were trying to antagonize people into a confrontation, saying, well, why don't you come up here and do something about it? What are you going to do? We're in charge here. Like barking at them and laughing at them, just kind of poking them with a stick. I turned around and said, you guys don't need to escalate this. And, of course, the reaction to it was another cop coming 2 inches from my nose and giving me the Ron White treatment about being drunk in public. And it was really strange, John, because this was supposedly in response to a noise complaint. There's a little too much noise, and it turned into manhandling people. And this isn't just me. This was a very large party. There are lots of people that are having problems with what's going on, but it speaks to a general, much broader militarization of the local police and a feeling that the citizens have lost control of their local governments and something else is at work. So, along those lines, I know we're so far from the transition there, the segue, that we almost forgot we had one. But you talk to a lot of people on a weekly basis, and you have a lot of guests come on your program on Coast to Coast, and we listen. We love some of the guests that you bring on there. Can you speak to this issue of people feeling like they've lost control of their local governments, and the people that are supposed to be protecting them are some cases turning antagonistic, if not out and out on another team?
If I didn't think that I would be perceived as having a psychotic episode, I would go into an R. Lee Ermey impersonation and say, in his wonderful Southern accent, you have lost control of your local governments. You have lost control of it. There are several factors that led to this. This is what's wonderful about being able to talk with you, because we're not going down a list of questions. We're having a conversation, and we get settled in, and then we reach out and see where we go with it,
right?
Which is great. I mean, like sitting around a fire, something like that.
Well, John, I like to say it like this: the way that we go, I'm known by many different nicknames in my lifetime, and Brian the bartender has been one of them. And I say, some guests come in and they want to talk about sports. Some guests want to come in and talk politics. Some guests want to start connecting dots and venture out into crazy train territory. And yeah, this is just a conversation, because it's the more dots that get connected, you start wondering, could it possibly be as crazy as it's starting to look? What do you think? Take a look at this. Look at that. And that's really what we're doing here.
Well, causes are smaller than their effects. And I began to... when I was in the 7th grade, you can figure out how old I am if you do the math carefully. I wrote a little, full notebook-size entry about the Kennedy assassination, because the whole thing looked absolutely, completely ridiculous to me. And as I go along, I just remember things or write them down, and then so that I don't forget them. And a lot of them I just remember. But one of the first TV shows, TV was that's when it was really the propaganda machine. You had lots of stuff showing wholesome American values and the consequences of crime. And there were some darker dramas that would be it would be difficult for young kids to understand. but they would still hear it, and it might help them build a code for proper living later. Now, a lot of people say, man, you're dreaming. It was never like that. It's like, yes, it was. There were many neighborhoods, and there are still many small towns that you don't even lock your doors. Nobody's going to do anything. I remember when the Speck murders occurred, shocked the entire nation. Well, you get that many people killed on a weekend in Chicago. That's not shot, that's killed. No big deal. So the first thing that happens is you start seeing TV shows where they glorify criminals because they have been turned to the purpose of good. As this philosophy of film and television making continues, it begins to justify their behavior because, the guy really is a criminal and he really did rip off a bunch of people. They don't talk about the college educations that weren't bought because of this. They don't talk about any of that. He's just a really good thief and a svelte, suave guy, and he works for the good guys now, so all is forgiven. No payback there.
No karma to deal with.
No karma to deal with at all. No karma train to board.
And he would prefer not to do it that way, but it beats the alternative.
What happened as a result of this was when criminals were portrayed before, even if they were portrayed by the Three Stooges, it would be, the striped shirt and then the mask that just goes over the eyes like a Zorro mask,
Right.
So, these people appeared to be criminals, burglars. But as time went by, they started becoming better dressed. The criminals began to have really good fashion sense, and they were really cool people, much cooler than the more interesting people than the good guys. So by the time it's all over with, the cops who are now looking at a situation where anybody, it could be the scruffy guy with the long hair looking like Kurt Cobain's little brother, or it could be the guy in the business suit. They just don't know. There's no way to know which of these two profiles is going to actually reveal themselves as the perpetrator, the criminal. So I think there's a huge distrust between the citizenry and the police now, and showing stuff like what happened to Rodney King was not good to the society. I mean, some things are wrong and some things are right. You can say something about either of these things, but you have to ask yourself the question, should anything be said about it? I don't know.
Huh.
I mean, some people say it's better to let 99 killers go rather than execute one innocent person. I grasp the humanity there, but the numbers aren't working for me. Does this make sense?
It does make sense, but what you said, I mean, coming from a radio guy, coming from a man that has lots of conversations, that's the same thing I do. I enjoy talking with people. Do I love having headphones on and talking into a microphone? I don't care, whatever. I'll talk with you, like you said, outside a campfire or at a bar, or it doesn't matter. I want to engage people in a better conversation than I'm getting through propaganda means. But your comment about, is it even worth discussing? Is it worth bringing up?
Well, more to the point, Brian, is it dangerous to bring it up? I mean, you can say a thing, but should you? Wow. I mean, where is our ethical yardstick that we measure that by? I don't know.
I don't either, John.
You don't want to cause any damage, and I don't want to be. I saw an interesting little expression that I remembered from years ago and had forgotten. He multiplieth words without knowledge. That's a good one. You and I don't want to be one of those people that multiplieth words without knowledge. But it seems like there is a mistrust of the police by the citizens, and a somewhat justifiable problem or mistrust of the citizenry by the police.
And what was that?
Absolutely.
What was that quote? It's better to keep your mouth shut and be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think you touched on something really good right there, that you said there's also now a mutual distrust from the police force looking at people on the other side, looking at the citizens. However, that happened. I'll tell you what, these people, I looked into their eyes, and they were there to fight. They were there I could feel the energy of aggression. This wasn't, hey guys, we've received some complaints. This is really a packed party. This is pretty ridiculous. It's time for everyone to leave. I am even going to give you a citation right now. I need everyone to walk out now. We're here to just get this done, and if we have to come back, the citation will be for double or triple, or just something, or, hey guys, you need to calm it down. It's, we're getting a couple complaints. Don't make us come back out here. Whether you want to give a ticket or give someone some leeway, that's discretion of the police officer. I'm fine with that. But this was different, John. This was different. This was straight out intimidation, and I have not felt this concerned for my country, and I've been pretty freaked out with the economic collapse for the past 3.5 years, 4 years, and reading the writing on the wall since 9/11. It just feels like we're headed toward something unpleasant, and when it reached out and literally grabbed me, I'm talking 6'4", 280 pounds of police officer, almost throwing you down the stairs for the crime of standing at your friend's home with a glass of water. Something's wrong. And when it reached out and literally grabbed me, and I could feel the evil, I could feel anger, I could feel aggression, I could feel intimidation, and John, it's one thing to talk about all these things philosophically, and then it's another when, what if this is your sister-in-law? What if this is your cousin? What if this is your mother? What if this happens to your son? Whatever the case may be, we all have family and friends. Do we have a responsibility to talk about it, to try to hope that it doesn't happen a second time and a third time and a fourth time?
Well, we're late. What I'm getting at is that we're late.
We are.
We are. Let's look what happened in Chicago just the other day. The story is that the motorcycle cop, kid comes out into the street, motorcycle cop, in an effort to avoid hitting her, dumps his motorcycle in the street, just drops it. The 18-year-old cousin has now run into the street to assist the first child, and she's hit by it also. The 42-year-old father then comes out and starts beating on the cop, and some of the neighbors come out and join in on this. So by the time this is over, the policeman said something to the effect that he was just about to pass out when he pulled that pistol and lit it off, killing the 42-year-old father that ran out and started beating the policeman in the first place. When this story is repeated, and this is shown on the news, and it's on the net, it has the effect of, in my opinion, of 50 such incidents being brought to the attention of the person. It doesn't... Let me tell you a quick one. When I first started in the radio business, and I've been away from it for a long time before I went back into Coast to Coast 6 years ago. Been away from it for 20. I used to call I thought, well, it was just a little station. You could walk 2 blocks the wrong direction and it'd drop right off your radio. Horrible signal, great proving and training ground. I would call the medical examiner's office in the morning just to kind of get some news going or something. And I began to notice that the number of bodies, murders, stabbings, shootings, and everything else was many times the number of these stories that actually made it on to the television news at 6 and 10 o'clock. And also on the radio news. Because if they went down the list of, 3 murders, 4 questionable ones, just naming off all these things that happened to people overnight, stabbings and hangings, suicides, everything, it's like it's enough to make everybody want to jump off the Hollywood sign, and that's if they could get to California and jump off the sign, jump off something nice in a nice place. It was just ghastly. So back in the day, one murder, or let alone something like Richard Speck killing the 9 nurses, shocked the entire nation. You got that stuff happening in every town every weekend. It's just continuous. So the only way to stop this is literally tell your friends about New American Media. Tell your friends about InfoWars. Just tell them. And then we'll just have to see how it works out, because we have awakened. We are working on this, but the machine is rolling down the road, and it has been for some time, unbeknownst to us, because we screwed up and we trusted our government instead of taking part in it, which is a sacred franchise that we just really don't care all that much about. We will fight hard for the country. and we'll raise a family, and we'll raise a city, and we'll do great things. We'll make ships that go under the ocean, and we'll go to the moon. We'll do all kinds of stuff. And then we did it, but we're going to have to work for it. We're going to have to work to get to this place. And then we got there, and we got soft, and now we don't really even care about it anymore. I asked this young woman the other day, I said, does your generation want freedom? And she said, well, yeah, but I don't want to start a war or anything. Which at that point I had to say, I do. So there you go. Another guy who is trying not to multiply with words without wisdom, but may have done it anyway. But that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
And John, you're onto something here. You're onto something where it says if you see something horrible, you know, pick a lousy story, and multiply it, watch it over and over again, and it has the effect of it happening 50 other times. Out here in Southern California, we've seen the Fullerton police beat and kill homeless man Kelly Thomas to death. They crushed his lungs, cracked his skull open, huge puddle of blood, had him sitting down on the concrete, you know, and they're messing with him. Put your hands on your knees, put your legs out in front, and do this, do that, turn this. They're just messing with him to the point where he puts on latex gloves and says, you know what these are? These are fists, and they're getting ready to F you up. Says that on camera, and then they kill him. And I cried. I watched it, and I cried for humanity. That's so sad. And I thought, wow, that is such a horrible occurrence. I can't believe there was one cop like that. And then you see that the riots going on in Anaheim because people are saying they're patrolling certain neighborhoods and they're using excessive force, and they continue murdering people. Now, some of the people murdered, yes, we can get into the details, fine. But okay, that's another thing that's weird. But when you run into it and it faces you head on, you know, you actually fear for your life. I actually feared for my life because I watched them with all the toys, all the guns, all the power, all the control, all the judicial power in their back pocket, and they were messing with me. And they were kind of sneering and laughing, like, "Come on, buddy, let's go. Come on, you want to rumble?" It's like one of those schoolyard bullies. And I kept shaking my head, like, I cannot believe I've actually blinked and ended up here. This is America. This is not the Gestapo. This is not the SS. This is not NATO. This is supposed to be our locals protecting us. And it made me scared, John. It really hit home for me that what they did to Kelly Thomas, murdered him, they could do this. And this was over a noise complaint that nobody was violent. There wasn't a melee. They weren't shutting down a rumble. The people weren't throwing snowballs or bricks or batteries or something. There was no need for any of this. And the only fortunate thing is that a lot of people pulled out their phones and started videotaping, and a lot of people are filing actual complaints with the force. But you know, you mentioned, well, yeah, I want freedom, I want liberty, but you know, I don't want to have to do anything. Well, I don't know if those can both exist.
It doesn't, and people have forgotten, but I bet they're going to find out. But I don't know. I think the game is far afoot. And there's a lot of activity around that. Now, some of it is. I mean, if you figure the Social Security Administration wanted 174,000 rounds. Well, if they've got 1,740 people, that's 100 rounds apiece. So that's not that much ammo. It does make you wonder why outfits like NOAA and everybody, the IRS last year, I guess it was, or earlier this year, ordered a bunch of shotguns for the Oakland office of the Internal Revenue Service. I mean, it was only 18 shotguns. So, you know, the IRS Enforcement Department, if they have to go visit somebody because of a bill that hasn't been paid, they need to pick their shotguns. I mean, what does that right there tell you? Well, I mean, is it because they can't knock on the door and ask nicely to see their records? Is it because some insane tax protester or something is actually holed up in there and is going to do like that guy did down in Austin, Texas, and I'll bring you the airplane that you want to take possession of, and he flies it into the building. Oh, yeah. Kill some security guard there that was just standing there doing his job.
Oh, yeah.
And here's the thing, you know, I am a little disappointed that the African-American community has leaders like Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton who aren't doing them any good and never will. But it's pretty easy to understand. That aside, it's pretty easy to understand how that group was treated by the police, it's kind of easy to understand why they'd be upset about it. The thing is that the only way forward is to let all that go. This slavery thing has got to be let go. It's holding everybody back, especially the African American community. You need to let it go. None of us who are alive today are responsible for that. And more to the point, there's plenty of our brothers that were slaves too, starting with the Irish. It was bad. It goes all the way back many centuries ago. And people just do not understand that every race and group on earth has suffered at one time or another. And we need to just stop holding that stuff against each other. I mean, the Germans still think about invading France again, some of them. I'm serious about this. Why is that bridge there? Oh, when we invade France again. And they're serious. It's like this has got to be let go, and everyone has to work together. They really do. We're not all going to be millionaires, but we can all be highly evolved, self-actualized, and maybe even on occasion happy, and most of the time productive human beings. And we can contribute to culture rather than destroy it. I mean, there seems to be a huge movement. I'm going to call it the lemming movement. There really are some, I interviewed an anarchist on the air, hardcore anarchist, who just feels like the entire system must come down before anything will improve. It's like, that is a nasty proposition, pal. I can understand why you might think that, but when you think of the practical effects of such an incident of total anarchy, that doesn't seem like a very good idea to me at all. But you're talking in terms of millennia. I mean, some of these people are just crazy.
And I would have a hard time disagreeing with that. And here's the thing. The thing that most people need to realize, just because you choose to have that interview with someone doesn't mean you buy into all of those ideas. It doesn't mean that you're feeling the same way. It doesn't mean you're with anybody 100% of the time, but it does mean you're willing to challenge yourself intellectually and at least consider walking in someone else's shoes. Hey, tell me about you. Wow, that's an interesting opinion that I definitely do not share. Let's continue. You know, we've reached a point where it's almost like we're not allowed to talk about stuff anymore. I mean, I have a sports show prior to this, and part of what I'm trying to do is connect sports fans with fans of world events and just say, look, you can root against a different team. Your dad could have been, raised in Pittsburgh. You might be a Steeler fan, but guess what? You're in L.A. now. Pick a team or this and that. And you have the debate back and forth. But the conversation, it's at the point where we're so polarized. You were saying where the problem right now is everyone going back into the past and carrying grudges forward. And yeah, every group of people has had hard times, and some of them have been a lot worse than others, and whatever the case may be. But what we need now, bringing the sports analogy back in here, is that we need a head coach that can get a team playing together and say, I don't care what high school you played for. I don't care if you played high school football in Texas. Fantastic. You're in Louisiana now. Or I don't care if you played for the Ohio State Buckeyes. You're over here as a Seattle Seahawk now. Whatever the case is, whatever the city, whatever the college or high school football program, I think Americans just need to be on the same team. And right now I feel like our head coach is trying to pit us against each other, divide, and then get the fans riled up to the point where it might not be safe to go into a stadium and watch a football game because everyone's being divided. I don't know how we've allowed that to happen, but I think just playing politics, I don't see that as a very positive way to get a team playing together, John.
Well, you're right, but I believe that altogether, there's the little picture. It's sort of like what I learned in flying. It's very interesting, I thought, and it told me a lot about life in general. In fact, the whole flying experience did. But when you're flying your airplane, you are moving through the air. That's true. But you are also moving with the air, meaning a giant air mass that you are in. I mean, this particular one that you're in. There are other air masses, farther away. But this air mass here is blowing you to the left. So, yes, you're going through it, but it's also carrying you slightly to your left because that's the direction it's blowing. So you have to compensate for that. So what I'm getting at is that as we live our daily lives, we're sort of we're flying through the air. But we are also flying through the air while simultaneously moving as a collective society. When people are under pressure, what do? They go to the ones that they revert to that tribal thing. They go to that clan thing. They bind themselves to like-minded persons in their lives. And I think that this is the reason that so much division is happening, is that everyone feels threatened, and so they're going to go with their group, and we're going to make our stand here against all of them. It's almost like that in that movie, The Man Who Would Be King, when the guy says, oh, enemies all around, you know? Yeah. 20, 30 different tribes, all enemies. Well, that's kind of what's happening here. We would do well to look at what's happened in other countries. We seem to have been lulled into this idea that these things that have happened to advanced, excellent civilizations that brought forth many cultural things. Cultural things meaning those things which enhance life, which according to the true meaning of philosophy makes for or aids in achieving a good life. But when they're under pressure, they're gonna circle the wagons, or they're gonna, you know, raise the drawbridge and just peep out and see who's about to get them, you know, like a bunch of UFOs that land in the middle of the night, and then in the morning they're just kind of peeking out their little windows, scoping each other out. That's how we've become. But we should not do this. Now, how do we get around it? I have no idea if the new leaders, the new would-be leaders, are going to be true men of character. I know there are true men of character and true women of character. We need to replace the career politicians with new people who are people of character, who really can't be bought. And then be prepared for somebody to follow them in their shoes, because they'll eventually get old, and the problems that are waiting to befall the civilization will be waiting as soon as this sentinel of law, order, and justice drops off the scope. They'll be right there to try and exploit that breach, and it has to be filled with another person of character. If we don't have a virtuous government, we're not going to have a virtuous nation. If you allow your society to continue to taunt people who don't make 200 grand a year or 100 grand a year with all these things that they cannot have other than to steal them, you know, when you are producing so many toys for so many people that you need to outsource your production to effectively slave labor in a communist country, what does this tell you about your civilization? Hence the anarchists' argument. You see, their solution to it is tear it all down, so that way nobody has an opportunity to perpetrate any injustice. I think it's juvenile, but I get it. So, am I multiplying words without wisdom again?
No, absolutely not, because
okay.
If they want to take everything down, because, you know, that's cutting off your nose to spite your face. You know, the whole anarchy thing. It's like, oh, well, you know, all of those things you're saying, you know, outsourcing to third world, damn near slave labor conditions, just so we can get toys and fancier stuff to... And it's interesting how you phrased it, too, to taunt people that don't have the money to afford it and bombard them with the distraction of that's what you need to be going for. I mean, I guess we can understand why the Occupy LA and why the 99% and looking at the evil, successful people, why that is starting to rise up, and why the Tea Party is saying, well, come on, 16 trillion in debt? I could do a better job managing finances than that. Give me a shot. You know, and I think there is some truth in there. And I think... It's just crazy to think about that the middle class has been so destroyed over the past several decades. We are quickly turning into a have versus have-not society, and that middle ground, it's getting smaller. And people are getting frustrated to the point where the middle class is looking at the poor saying, hey guys, all of you that have the use of your body and you're not, you know, physically disabled or mentally disabled, can you please start making some better decisions and pick yourself up, because we're broke and we can't keep funding it? And then the middle class looks at the rich and says, hey guys, you know that whole tax system that's super sweet for you? I can't read. I can't read through hundreds of thousands of pages that don't make any sense. It's intentionally vague and you're scamming the system. You need to stop that. And the middle class right now is completely under assault from both sides. The super rich and the super poor are pulling on the middle class. It's just, it's really bad, John. It's really bad right now.
Yeah, it's a sink or swim situation. And, of course, we have more people on disability now than ever before. We have more people on some sort of federal aid than ever before, some ridiculously high number of millions. and the leadership is all over the place in other places. I can't call this man's name at the moment, but he's very hardcore left. He's worth about $42 million, and he was talking about how opposing President Obama's policies is just absolutely suicidal for the country. You know, it's almost like this multi-millionaire doesn't like capitalism, because that's what happens a lot of times. People become successful, and then I bought everything that I want. I have everything that a person. This stuff must be evil because because I feel so empty even after having all this money, all this privilege, all this abundance. I'm bored and hollow. I mean, that's how people are. I mean, that just goes back to the old Greek tragedies. Like I say, you know, that's why we study Greek theater, because the stories never change. It's still the greed, avarice, jealousy, blah blah blah, and it doesn't change.
You're absolutely, John. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, here's the thing. Everyone needs to understand this, and maybe they do, but I don't think I've heard anyone ever say it like this. Maybe they have, but I'm claiming it. The world is run by multinational corporations and the bankers into whose banks those corporations put their money. From that money flows influence, political influence at the highest level all the way down to the city level. It's all driven by money and favors and really the promise of abundance to people who will participate in a very large scheme of manipulation. If you had any idea, I say if you, I just mean if one.
No offense.
If one had
no
any,
offense.
I didn't mean that. I wasn't trying to jump on you. Right? Do you know that there is a little piece of every gallon of gas price that still goes to the biggest oil man of all time? To see the breakdown of where that money goes is absolutely extraordinary. So if you want to get people's attention, Bloomberg recently said he can't believe that every police officer in the country doesn't go on strike until the American people do the right thing and give up their, I see with brackets around it. It's not exactly what he said, but until Americans give up their guns or, reduce the number of them or legislate them more or whatever.
That was great.
More, whatever.
Yeah, I liked that one a lot. That was rational.
Well, how about this one, Mr. Bloomberg? I can't believe that there hasn't been another Boston-style Tea Party where hundreds of millions of people decided that, you know what, you close the borders, you get us out of these undeclared wars, you enact a fair tax system, and you allow an audit of the Federal Reserve Bank, and we'll start paying our money again. And until you do, we won't. So Bloomberg's got his line, and I've got mine. Now, am I advocating a tax protest? No. I'm saying, would that get somebody's attention or what? It sure got the British attention when they dumped that tea in the Boston Harbor.
Well, and that's what I was getting at earlier, John. When this event occurred this past weekend and 12 to 20 people in a police helicopter came by, it's one thing if it's happening to one person where a woman's getting shoved into a railing and almost thrown down the stairs and abused by a police officer. It's another thing when it happens a second time, and then a third time, and then a fifth time, and then a 10th time. It's one thing for one person to stand up and say, I'm drawing a line in the sand here because I think it's pretty rational, the things that I'm saying, and these other things I can't accept in my life anymore. I need to draw a line in the sand, and I can't be pushed back to that other side anymore because that's not who I'm going to be. For one person to do something, maybe there's an interpretive quality to that, and maybe you could explain some of that away. But when 10 people do something together in unison, or 100 people, or 1,000 people, or a few million, I think most people just want to be left alone. I don't think everybody's as power hungry as some of those who currently have the power. And it's one of those situations where if you look around and see the size of the group of piranhas you're swimming in, well, you don't need to be afraid of the other animal as much anymore because you realize you have all the numbers on your side. And something's got to give, John, because the country's broke. We're headed in a really scary direction, and people are getting more and more concerned and feeling the abuse from the people in control. And something's got to give here.
If the people who have the power cannot be called to account when they do wrong, where does a civilization go from there? I mean, justice becomes a thing. It's just a term. It's just a word.
Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson said, "Resistance to tyranny is obedience to God." And if you have a tyrannical force, define tyranny. And if you're opposing tyranny, you're therefore on the side of God, however that's choose to be defined by whoever, because Jefferson certainly didn't push that at people and try to get them to convert. But if you're opposing tyranny, that would seem like that's one side, and that would be the good side of things.
You know, Brian, the thing that worries me is that words like tyranny and even freedom have become almost archaic because they've been repeated so often. It's almost like Animal Mother said in Full Metal Jacket. Freedom is just a word. You know, and this is a slaughter. You know, if I'm going to die over a word, and then he said what his word was going to be, which is not suitable for broadcast, but at least not until after midnight. But seriously, hasn't it? Well, not said. Let's. I won't go negative. Has it become, in your opinion, just a word, just a cliche? I mean, every upstart group that goes out shooting, collateral targets mostly, they're all freedom fighters. You know, they hooked onto that name real quick. They're all freedom fighters. So, after we've seen enough of that, do we even care about that word anymore? In other words, are we just operating on our feelings now rather than logical thought, which is dictated by the words that we use?
You know what? That dovetails nicely because we're getting ready to put out a video. We spoke with Jordan Maxwell over at the Conscious Life Expo, and we've just kind of hung on to the video. We're going to be putting it up on the website real soon. And he's really big on that as well. He gets into really trying to examine the use of words and the meaning of words and the power of words. And if you use the right phrase and if you say it the right way and how words can lose their purpose. You're right. Freedom, liberty, freedom ain't nothing. I mean, you can pick it apart and you can sing along to it in 100 different songs, whether it's Janis Joplin or some country star today. But what does it really mean, and what is it worth? And at what point does something get so bad that you have to stand up and be counted? Because most people are saying, look, if I stand up, I might be the tallest weed, and I'm going to get weed whacked first. You know, I don't want to stand up. I don't want to be the squeaky wheel. Maybe I can just be quiet and live in the shadow, and maybe it'll just go elsewhere. Maybe the storm won't hit my town. Maybe I'll be okay if I just stay under the radar. Because I think there's a lot of that feeling out there from a lot of people.
There's really no place to run to. I mean, it's possible if things got really bad in this country that Americans fleeing the country might wind up being hunted all over the world just because they're Americans. And things like this have happened. You know, the other night, I think Tuesday night, I went to see an old hippie band, Crosby, Stills, and Nash.
All right.
And when those guys came out, there were Stills. He still looked like Stills. He kind of had that Abe Lincoln thing going. Graham Nash looked like an older version. He looked like David Bowie's older brother. And then there was David Crosby with this magnificent mane of white hair. The guy didn't miss a note the whole night. And they played for 3 hours with a half-hour break in the middle. And I got to tell you that listening to those songs, I realized that here we are pushing into 5 decades. We're working on the 5th decade. The complaints remain the same. The injustices remain the same. And in fact, they wrote a new song called Almost Gone about the soldier who's in an 8 by 6 foot concrete room because he was the one that tipped off Assange and WikiLeaks.
I was gonna. I have a list of 10 interesting stories to bring up, and that was on it. Go ahead.
Well, it's just that the complaint it remains the same. An undeclared war, loss of life, the tragedy of all these people that have really nothing to do with the conflict. They just happen to live in these towns that are being blown up like that. I understand that I have a very limited understanding of the mechanisms within the operation of the world, but it sure seems like there's a lot of suffering that is completely unnecessary, and there seems to be no bloody end to it. Emphasis on the bloody. You know.
So is that a good thing because there's no bloody end to it, or the British way of just there's no stinking end to it? Yeah, man. You know.
Yeah, there's no end to it.
It's funny, John. Sometimes I talk to you, I feel like I'm writing secret notes in milk, or something like trying to write an invisible thought to you, and then mail a blank piece of paper, and then you can light it over a candle or apply some lemon juice and see what the message is, because you just peel back the layers of this. You mentioned Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and Young for that matter, but the song "Meet Your New Boss," same as the old boss. Musicians have a great way of summing things up on bumper sticker type things, and that really connects. Music has always connected, and I had this conversation the other day. Where are the musicians right now that are really speaking up about this? Obviously, Rage Against the Machine, Muse. There's a few bands that are starting to get acclimated, but I'm wondering where the musical revolution is to kind of crystallize what's going on. I feel like that's one key component I haven't really seen enough leadership on.
Well, I'll tell you, Dave Mustaine of Megadeth, Metallica is.
Well, both. He started in Metallica, and then he's been in Megadeth for the past 3 decades.
Okay, that's it. Well, look, here's the thing.
Yeah, they're both right.
I think the bloody music's rubbish. Okay. However, I admire their success. I like that. I started putting sets of what I call death rock together back in the late '70s. So somebody heard it and went, "Yeah, man, death rock." But no, David is. I'm sorry, David. The music's fine, pal. He's a friend of Alex Jones's, and he's completely disgusted with what this administration's been doing in the direction of the country. He's quite tuned into it. There are actually several musicians that are still, pretty anti-establishment, but more to the point. And of course, Nugent has been doing this for 10 years,
right?
Longer than that, more like 20. He didn't like all that stuff that was going on in the Clinton administration with the Ruby Ridge deal and Waco and all of that, and then that craziness down in Florida with the U.S. Marshals and the machine guns throwing Elian Gonzalez out of the country.
Oh yeah, that was great.
I mean, it's just stupid. So no, I think they're coming around.
Yeah, I caught that Dave Mustaine interview on Alex Jones. I did catch that, and he mentioned the Oath Keepers a few times, and we've had Stuart Rhodes on the program before, and I was just wondering. I wonder if Dave Mustaine knows Stuart. I wonder if they've introduced each other yet. I wonder if they've had a conversation, because it's just you're noticing more and more people starting to stand up and say, "I will be a squeaky wheel. Something doesn't feel right." And it feels like that there's greater power with greater numbers when you lock arms philosophically with somebody else and say, look, I don't need to love all of your music. I think Symphony of Destruction was all right. The Trust on a later album was pretty cool, but I'm not a huge fan of their music. But when I heard him connecting, I said, you know what that means? That's 3 generations of metalheads that are at least listening to a guy with some street cred who's an articulate guy. You don't have to agree with everything he says. That's fine. You don't have to agree with anything anyone says. You shouldn't. You should think for yourself and go research your own data. We have the internet. Nothing's stopping anyone from doing that. But I love that different niches are starting to stand up and starting to speak out, because it seems like we've been paralyzed for a little bit, where our vocal cords, we were trying to talk and no sound was coming out for a while, and I'm sensing that's starting to change.
I think it is. The Hollywood group has to kind of keep it on the down low. In fact, there are several people whose names you would recognize instantly that just keep their conservative ideas to themselves, because life can be very difficult for you out there.
I'm looking at the Hollywood sign right now, John. I mean, I'm certainly not surrounded by a lot of people that would really agree with many of the things I say. And I've just had to figure out, should I try to kind of coast under the radar, or how much longer are we going to have free speech? You have bands getting thrown in jail for 2 years in Russia because, well, they don't like what they're up to. Well, is that going to happen here? How long am I allowed to run my mouth? How long am I allowed to connect with you in Texas and my other radio show in Vegas, the other show I do out of Chicago? How long do I have to at least try to communicate with everyone I can? Because, John, I think my soul's eternal. I think I'm going to be judged at the end of this video game, and someone's going to say, hey, let's take a look. Let's do a replay on how you played this video game. And I just want to say I tried. I don't know if I did anything, but I tried to beat the game. I tried to play the game the right way. I don't know. I played it the way I knew how to play it. That's all I can do, I think.
The problem with civilization is that you give up a little bit of freedom to enjoy the collective efforts of the civilization. But as the civilization gets bigger and bigger, the civilization no longer serves the individual. It's the individuals that are serving the civilization, and that's the point that we've reached now. I really don't know how it's going to shake out any more than anyone else does. I suspect that this clannishness will continue. And by the way, before we leave your police incident completely, one of my back office intel people just approached 4 police officers and just said, "Say, can I ask you fellows a question?" And they said, "Yeah, sure, whatever." He said, if you were ordered to begin collecting firearms from citizens' homes, and if necessary to fire on them and kill them, would you do it? And the guy who, my man said, presented himself the best, was the most soldier-looking of the group, most soldierly groomed of the group, said, "Absolutely not, sir." And the other 3 looked at this other cop like, "What are you saying?" So there was 1 in 4 that was clearly on the side of the Constitution, and 3 others that were prepared to follow orders.
2 out of 10. 2 out of 10 in the immediate area where I was at. 2 out of 10. I mean, look, I've played football. I've been in scuffles. I know what it's like to be standing next to someone that doesn't like you, and to have a thought of what they're thinking. I've been threatened before. I've battled other opponents in football before. And you look in their eye and you know where you're going. You know if you've beaten your opponent. You know if they want to be there, if they don't want to be there. You know if they're serious or if they're just going through the routine. And you learn this. I've worked with bouncers in the nightclubs where I've been a bartender my whole life. You know the bouncers that want to fight and the bouncers that want to go home and just relax. There's a big difference. And I can tell you at least 2 of these people wanted to fight. And I think that's insanity. This isn't an MMA match. This is real life. And there were at least 2 that wanted to fight. Good bouncers, good barbacks want to calm things down, keep things cool. Let's just move along. Let's all go home. Let's keep having fun. Those are the good bouncers. And I think you're onto something there, that there's probably a division within the ranks in politics, in military, in law enforcement. I think there is a division in the ranks. And the question is, if it ever came down to it, would people do unconstitutional activities? I don't know the answer to that either.
My impression is that they would at first, until enough of them had a conscience over the blood in the street, and then they might go the other way. And then there'd be a redress of grievances and a big rigmarole over these people's rights that were violated, which means that they got themselves killed for doing nothing other than being citizens and being present and participating in the system. Here's the thing: what's it going to be? Is it going to be a nuclear problem? Fukushima's still leaking, and there's not much information coming out of there, but everything that's coming out of there is terrible. Every department under the federal government is apparently arming up. I'm still curious. 176,000 rounds I can see. 460 million, that's quite a bit.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering what they're getting ready for, as we started this conversation with. I don't know. I think I'm thinking Greece is probably going to default. I think Germany is going to get mad and leave the euro. And I don't know what that's going to do to our currency, but $17 trillion is a 17 with 12 zeros past it. there's not enough money on earth to pay this debt off.
No, and I don't see any leadership coming from the head coach and the organ. You know, I keep using the football analogy, but I don't see the head coach of this country addressing this. I don't see the head coach saying, "Look, we're running in the red. We gotta totally look. This isn't working. We gotta." I don't see any seriousness. How do you run a country without a budget for 4 years? I can't even believe I have to say such a thing. A CEO would be fired in a quarterly statement if they showed up without a budget to the shareholders. But here we are, what 4 quarters times 4 years, 16 times in, where we don't even know where the money's going. We don't even know how it's being printed, how it's being devalued. I got a silver back as change the other day, and I said, "Wow, I'd love to actually trade this in for some silver." I'd trade out of paper in a heartbeat.
Right?
I'd take it.
What does it tell you that the Federal Reserve Bank's members are secret? That the legislature, the House of Representatives, pardon me, I had to confuse the Texas for just a second. The House of Representatives overwhelmingly voted to audit the Federal Reserve. Senate said, Reid, I believe it was, said it'll never get through the Senate.
Right, and he was on video saying that they needed to happen when he needed to dance and do a different marionette jig, when he had to do a different dance. Before, he was like, "Yeah, we should audit," and "Yeah, those guys are bad," and that's no, we shouldn't do that. And it's just a marionette. It's a puppet show, John. It's a left hand and a right hand. It's the same mind. It's the same 2 sets of hands, and it's just a distraction. I've lost so much faith in the political system, meaning very much of anything. Frankly, who's supposed to be the hero that's going to come in and save the day? Romney? Is that an actual choice when both support the NDAA? When I don't know if that's much of a choice right there. I don't know.
Well, in the end, we'll just have to wait and see how bad it gets. If we continue to allow, look, here's the thing: there's too much to do. The first thing that you have to do is you have to audit every member of Congress. Anybody who's crooked gets to leave. You have to have term limits so these people don't make careers out of politics. And the auditing part is to determine how is it that you made so much money while you were in office. We need the answers to those questions. As far as the Abe Lincolns of the world, you know, walking in there and doing his thing and doing it for the love of the country and trying to save the Union, if that story is accurate, if it is to be believed, we only have the writings and the records of the words that he spoke to determine that. I think there's a concerted effort to make us believe that the whole American experience from its inception to the present day is nothing but a bunch of made-up fantasy, that nobody who really runs it believes any of this, that it's just some mung to feed to the masses, and that's it. That it's all just smoke and mirrors. There's no freedom. There's nothing, just like that. That's like a film I saw recently, the moronic masses, just living their little austere lives, going along happily. It's like, well, you're going to live till you die. And I think we know that these people in power are actually a bunch of freaks, a lot freakier than anything you're going to find, during a wild Saturday night in any city you can name. These people are real freaks. It wouldn't surprise me in the least if they wanted a global infrastructure set up and then reduce the population dramatically, either through disease, warfare, or whatever it takes. And then, look how much more land we have to control, we and our progeny. Wouldn't surprise me at all. I don't know the answer to it. I just know that there's ugliness afoot, and these people seem to be completely, the bankers seem to be completely immune to prosecution, and the politicians seem to be completely immune from ejection from the system when they're found to be dirtballs. They just keep coming back, or their proteges come in. So unless the people decide that they're going to thoroughly vet and maybe even invest in someone to get them through a school like Hillsdale, where they know the Constitution. Constitutional law students say, if you will become a leader of this country and run for office, we'll support you. We'll put you through college. We'll put you through university.
Wow.
I mean, maybe some leaders should be groomed rather than just some stand-ins for the last guy that's now leaving office, and we need another one just like him. Let's shove this one in. How about we actually groom some real, no-kidding constitutional leaders?
Well, I know more people in
going-
my life, John. I know more people in my life than ever that can quote to you, what is the 10th Amendment? What is the 4th Amendment? What is the 6th Amendment? What is the 14th Amendment? What is the second? You know, and I think for years, other than the First and Second Amendment, most people were, I don't know, it's a bunch of stuff. It's like if you ask them, what are the 10 Commandments? They go, I don't know, don't swear or murder or something. I don't know, something like that. Be good. But I think people are now starting to wake up, like you said earlier. I think people are doing their research and trying to become educated as to how this was stolen away in the first place. Little chip, little piece by little piece by little piece. You know, and that's the thing about baby steps. After enough time has passed, you look back and you can't see where you started. And I think that document is something that more of us need to be paying attention to. But, John, we're almost about out of time here. So one of the things I did want to bring up is your website. You do have, you said, you know, there's so much going on. What is it that we can do? You know, and you said stand up, participate on a local level. You brought up the Fukushima event. It's a subject that's near and dear to your heart, and you do run a website called caravantomidnight.com. Can you tell our listeners about that?
Well, I started that website because the whole Fukushima incident appeared to me to be something that was going to continue to expand. And now we have the mutant butterflies. There are all kinds of genetic mutations that are happening over there, and it'll be 10 years before they can even begin the cleanup. And as you see with these earthquakes and things, a lot can happen in 10 years. So I did caravantomidnight.com because I wanted to make Geiger counters, radiation detectors available to the public, and I've got some water purifiers on there too. You know, I'm not modeling bikini underwear on the site. I'm not just selling everything that I can think of on it. But I did want to get these radiation detectors into people's hands because just the other day I popped open some special tea, do a little tea ceremony, and just enjoy and meditate a little bit while you watch the sun come up. Just make a big deal out of it. You know, and Lipton's would do, but this is special tea. And I took out my little Russian-made detector and waved it over the tea, and it spiked. Not much, but it spiked above background, and it was a spike. There was enough points that it did not indicate it was grown in sunlight or anything else. It indicated it. So the tea was, in fact, from Japan.
So your meditation includes a Geiger counter. That's part of the routine. The meditative process is a Geiger counter.
So just place it between your palms and just do a little bow over the tea. And if it starts rattling or the numbers start going up, then just back away a little bit and go get some orange juice.
2012. May we live in interesting times, John.
Oh, we are. We are, my friend. I'm afraid it may become more interesting still.
Well, basically on the site then, you have a few different options. You went and bought some of this stuff in bulk, and it's for sale on the site, so people can have something handheld if they want to check their produce. They want to just keep around in case of emergency. I mean, I'm living on the left coast here in Los Angeles, and I'm growing food outside, and it's coming across the Pacific. I mean, I just kind of feel like, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? But I think a tool to give me information, that's a great place to start.
Yes, it is, and it gets into everything. It gets into now. There's nothing can be done about the tritium that's being released from a plant up in Canada because it gets into the water. But that's another story. This is ionizing radiation that is specific to a disaster like Fukushima experienced. And you mentioned a big purchase. I did get a bunch of them, so we knocked $50 off of each of the Russian units. Money's tight now, so this sounds like a lie, but it's really true. I'm more interested in getting these things into people's hands than I am making money right now. I just turn the money that comes in right back into product, and the supply starts and stops. And we also work with Vince Mazer up in Colorado, who makes a more sophisticated unit. But all of these units do the same thing. Just some of them do more. You take more measurements, and you can download information, stuff like that. If you live in a part of the world where you want to monitor this stuff and track trends, you can do that with the Mazers. Okay. But as far as just something in your pocket to go check your building supplies with, or whatever, metals, indoor air, outdoor air, food, whatever, the little guys will do just fine.
Well, knowledge is power, and if you have something like that in your back pocket, literally in your back pocket, knowledge is power. You can't really go wrong just double checking for yourself and making sure, and that's what you're doing over there at caravantomidnight.com. I know you also do. You also continue to do the voiceover work. So if people wanted to contact you for any of that voiceover stuff that you do so well, is that also the same website? Where would they find you for that?
You can reach me on caravantomidnight.com. In fact, my other one, johnbwells.com, is being rebuilt right at the moment. It'll be back, but it's not up now, but it will be. And yeah, thank you very much for putting that out there. It's, it's good to have it. It's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it.
I heard that phrase in an elevator at a talent agency I was working at out here in Beverly Hills, and talking about this early meeting, and I stayed up all night, and I put this report together, and turns out they didn't need it. And that's exactly what his friend said. It's better to need it. Better to have it and not... Well, you know what I'm saying. Now I'm doing the George Bush thing. Fool me once, fool me twice. I'm messing up my own quote that
Won't get fooled again.
Yeah, you ain't gonna fool me again. But anyway, yeah, it's better to have it and not need it. And knowledge is power. So yeah, go ahead and check out caravantomidnight.com if you want to check out what John is doing with his handheld radioactive devices to make sure that you are not being exposed to stuff you shouldn't be. John, by the way, on our way out the door, why don't you tell us who's going to be coming up on Coast to Coast? Any guests that you're going to be having? You're pretty settled in with your Saturday night gig now. Pretty stable. Pretty probably finding a rhythm at this point. Are there any guests that are on your radar either this week or coming up that are especially interesting to you? Anything you're starting to get amped up about?
Oh, absolutely, positively. The thing that I'm really amped up about is the one. Well, I'm actually amped up about both of them. This one is this program is going to be entitled "The Two Franks." Everybody's heard of the movie "The Two Jakes." This is "The Two Franks." This is Frank Wuko, who is an expert in the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, its history and purpose and goals and worldview, and also these leaks that are coming out of the highest places in our government. That stuff doesn't get leaked out by accident. It gets leaked out on purpose. And then Frank Wuko will be followed by Frank Fernuccio. He's a national expert on policy and government affairs, and we will discuss why Chinese espionage is not being taken seriously. And more to the point, if the Chinese have such a tight grip on their internet, how come all these cyber attacks are coming out of Beijing? I wonder.
And you're going to get all into that. Is that going to be tomorrow then for the show on August 18th?
That's right. It starts at about 6 minutes after 10 p.m. Pacific, and then the following weekend, I'll do Friday and Saturday night. And that Saturday night, 25th, will be what I hope will be a banking spectacular, where we will explore the logic behind the statement, the best way to rob a bank is to own one.
Oh, that is great. And did you hear about the guy that got arrested because he had a sign that said that, and he got charged with some sort of domestic terrorism? Did you hear about that one? Oh,
no,
yeah.
Tell me about it.
Well, I mean...
Was that you?
What day is today? The 17th? Let's see by the 19th. I mean, the way things are going, I mean, I got harassed for being a 33-year-old adult male while holding water in America. I didn't know that was a crime. But, no, I mean, it's I love that quote because you look at the whole rigged system. And I'll tell you this, like I said, I got silverbacks. Back is change, and it's a U.S. dollar that said you could redeem it at the Federal Reserve for actual $1 in silver currency, 90% silver. That has a significantly higher resale value than a piece of paper does today, and you got to think. One person in a family used to be able to go out and work and support a family, and someone could work on the kids and teach them some morals and grow up, in that way. And now the money doesn't buy anything. And people are working and working and working, and we're just chasing our tail. We're kind of like hamsters on a wheel, and we're not getting anywhere. So I like that. You're going to have a show come up. You said that's the 25th, talking about the banking institutions, right?
Yes, indeed. It's going to be another forum, like the Fukushima forum. It had a different expert on for each of the 4 hours. So it'll be rich. I won't be doing most of the talking. I'm going to let them do it and just ask one of my infamous indiscreet questions. On occasion.
One of those many questions at the same time fired out the back door. Yeah,
I love to do that.
We've heard,
because if you do that, that person's brain is going to go click, and you're going to get the answer to all of those things, but it won't be the direct answer to any one of them. And I think it just makes for more fun conversation.
Well, and that's why we like to keep bringing you back on here, is because on the show you have a time to talk and you have a time to shut up and listen. And then you have a time to make connections and ask follow-up questions. There's a whole... To anyone that doesn't do radio, it actually is a science. It is an art form. It does take a little bit of work to try to keep it flowing consistently. And that's why I really like to go out. I go out to sports guests that always are out, covering sports, but they have to do it within a strict parameters. I like to bring people on here where... people that are normally asking the questions, hey, now let's open it up. where do you want to go? You know, this is a totally different forum. This is a totally different place. It's like if you know, Kyrie Irving on the Cleveland Cavaliers basketball team wants to just play a pickup game at the YMCA. Well, it's not for real. It's not $1 million game. But you can play it differently. You can have fun. You can do different things with it. So, you know, we always like that. And I will give you guys a shameless plug because if you go to coasttocoastam.com, it's a franchise that's been going on for a long time. I know a lot of our listeners, John, I'm actually quite surprised. Several people, as we've informed them about Coast to Coast, we've heard, you know, I think I've heard of that. Or, I don't know what that is. And I'm astonished because I had a great professor at Bowling Green State University tell me about 15, 20 years ago, maybe about 10, 15 years ago, that you need to listen to Coast. And so for about 15 years, I've really been inundated, soaking it all up, never buying all of it, but absorbing it all and considering it all. And it's a great show. I mean, whether it's the paranormal, whether it's UFOs, whether it's government conspiracies, whether it's anything. It's a lot of stuff you're not going to find on the mainstream. So to anyone out there that isn't familiar with Coast to Coast AM, they have something called the Insider, and we're members over there because we can't always listen at 10 o'clock at night to 2 in the morning. I think it's like $6 or $7, and you get all of like 3 years of episodes. You can just dig in, 4-hour episodes, no commercials, and I just really think it's a great product. I think it's a great show. It's a great franchise, and we're getting a lot of feedback that you're doing a really good job over there. People that we're talking to are appreciating how you're handling yourself on those Saturday nights, like you say. With ship's captain George Norrie, you know, you're kind of filling in on those Saturdays, but a lot of people are digging where you're coming from. So keep up the good work as always, John, and to be continued, I suppose. It's always a good time having you over here, and you're always welcome.
Well, thank you very much, and be well. Until next time, let's keep a good eye on things, and we may have to do a segment sometime called, well, let's go ahead and agree to agree.
Agree to agree.
I agree.
What do we do on that one? More of the same?
Well, I think that's what we just did.
You know what? I think we found a title for today's show. Thank you, John.
My pleasure, Brian. Be well.
All right, have a great weekend. That was John B. Wells of Coast to Coast AM. Yeah, like he said, you know, if you want to check out some of the stuff he's doing with Caravan to Midnight, he's got these handheld Geiger counters, and he does voiceover work. It's one of the most unique voices in radio, and he does, you know, the voiceover work in television and commercials and stuff. So check him out. Check his personal site out, caravantomidnight.com. And, of course, he is the regular Saturday night host of Coast to Coast AM. I believe on the Premier Radio Network. Really good stuff. Him and George Norrie and George Knapp. You know, because at the end of the day, the most important thing we can do is we need to connect. We have to connect with other people that are at least trying to understand. Try to find other people that are at least interested in seeking truth, challenging dogma, and having fun. And that is our tagline over here at thenewamericanmedia.com. I'm your humble host for this show on Agree to Disagree, but today's version is called Agree to Agree. Thank you for that title, John. Appreciate that. Yeah, but definitely check out John B. Wells on Saturday nights on Coast to Coast AM. Special thanks to all of our guests on the Unhappy Hour. Zach Barris, good times. NBA Scout, thank you very much for joining us today. And please do us a favor, if you're not subscribed to us, we post all these on YouTube. YouTube.com/TheNewAmericanMedia. Click subscribe. We appreciate that. Check out TheNewAmericanMedia.com. We're doing a revamp as well and a relaunch. Twitter, I don't know, what do we have, 14,000, 15,000 followers? We're at American_media_. Like us on Facebook. Do all of that stuff. And let's stay connected. Because things might get dicey. Things might get a little hairy, if you will. Things could get tense. Things could get rough, but let's just remember our compass. Let's remember that we're in this together, and we can help each other, and that's a lot better than the alternative. My name's Brian Engelman. Thank you for listening. Until next week, everybody, take care.